Each and every one of you in your workplaces and organizations will have policies, procedures, or practices. Some of you will have them codified, they will be written, and some of you will not have them, they will be just practices. Okay? The dilemma with policies, procedures, and practices is this: there's always an unintended consequence. There always is an unintended consequence. So you have to make certain that when you're putting these into place, that it isn't creating a barrier inadvertently for someone. You have to ensure that those policies meet those principles of dignity, respect, equal opportunity, and independence. You don't restrict people from coming into your organizations that need the use of an assistive device. Anything that helps an individual break down barriers can be an assistive device. And what you need to know about an assistive device is this: as an organization, okay, you don't have any obligation to provide assistive devices. You don't have, not under the customer service standard. Okay. However, you could choose to, as an organization, to do that. And if you choose to do that, you have to train your staff on their use. Service animals can be trained or untrained. Okay. Service animals can be readily identifiable, like a CNI dog, okay, with a patch or a harness, or they cannot have that identification tab. Okay, so again, don't make assumptions. You're going to have to ask. Okay, and the idea of service animals is this: clearly, you do not prevent an individual that requires a service animal from accessing the goods and services that you're providing at your organization or your place of business. Okay, unless it's prohibited by law. Unless it's prohibited by law. What area would be prohibited by law to allow a service animal? There is an area. Kitchen, absolutely. Service animals are extremely important to folks with a disability, depending on what their disability is. That's why it's important to not bar access to anyone with a service animal unless it's prohibited by law, and one of the areas is a kitchen, as someone mentioned. Okay, so really, really important. But because it's not readily obvious, because not all service animals are identifiable, you can ask, is that a service animal? And if the person says, yes, it's a service animal, the second thing you can ask is, well, do you have a note from a doctor or a medical practitioner attesting that this is a service animal? Okay, and if it's not readily obvious and they don't have the note, then you don't have to accept that as a service animal. Anyone can be a support person. So what do you need to know about support people? Clearly, you have to allow them entry. Okay, you can't say, I'm sorry, you're the support person, you can't come in. Clearly, you can't do that. The other thing you need to know about a support person is that if you're charging admission fees of any kind, you have to clearly decide what your policy is with respect to those admission fees. So for instance, if I'm running a theater, I need to decide, when someone comes in with a support person, will I be charging the support person full ticket price, or will I be charging them half ticket price? Will I be charging them nothing? There's no right or wrong answer to that, and there's no obligation under the Act to make a decision one way or the other. What the obligation is that you have to make a decision, whatever it is. You can say, I'm charging full fare or I'm charging half fare, but what you have to do when you make that decision, you have to prominently post it so that there's no misunderstanding as to what you're going to charge that individual that's a support person. Okay, really important. When you're communicating with someone, and I like to say whether they have a disability or they don't have a disability, you need to understand that your communication is effective. You know, it's reaching the person you'd like to reach. There is understanding because you're conveying it in a way that it can be understood. And you can do that in a number of ways. You can do it in writing, you can use pictures, you can do it by telephone, online. Okay, don't make assumptions. Always ask or start that interaction with, how may I help you? Once you do that, then you can solve the problem. They're going to do some work on the sidewalk outside of your place of employment. The municipality calls you and tells you, they say, you know, on Wednesday and Thursday we're going to be doing some work, just to let you know. So as a business, what would your obligation be under this standard? Post it. Tell people in advance that on Wednesday and Thursday of next week there will be a disruption of services at our place. That way folks don't come down there just to find out, oh my goodness, you're closed. Okay, because sometimes it's hard for people to get out. Okay, so you try and tell them in advance. If you know, tell them the reason for the disruption, the length of the disruption, and if you have another way of providing your service during the disruption, tell them how to do that as well. You have to have a feedback process. You have to tell people what your feedback process is. You have to make that available so people understand what your feedback process is if they need any more information about how are you dealing with folks with a disability under the customer service standards. Okay, if you're 20 or over, employers 20 or over, you will also have to show, if you're asked, your policies, okay, in a form that people can access, okay, so that they can see them. But it's really important that you have that feedback process and that you post it so people are aware of how to access information, or if they need to file a complaint because your policy said this thing but your staff did that thing, they know who to get to so you can get that corrected right away. There is a training obligation under this piece of legislation. There is a training obligation. And I got to tell you, unless you're into training, when you talk training, people's eyes glaze over. Okay, because, oh my goodness, now I got to develop a training package. The good news is, and I'll talk about it now, is we have developed that package for you. Okay, if you go to our website, accessibilityworks.ca, we have already developed the training package that you can use to train your staff in your workplace, and it's free. It's there. Okay, it's a tutorial. It sets out all of the obligations. It gives a little bit of instruction and some information about the piece of legislation, and then there's a quiz at the end that folks can actually test how much they learned when they took the tutorial. Okay, and then you can download a little piece of paper that says, I, Jane, or I, Sally, or I, Joe, successfully took the self-assessment test. Okay, and you can use that as documentation that yourselves and your staff were trained. Now, what you have to do in addition to that, because clearly we don't know all your policy, specific practices at your workplace, you're going to have to train your staff on what you want them to do within the workplace. Everybody needs to be trained in your organization, all staff, including full-time, part-time, seasonal, contract employees, volunteers, agents of contractors, and others who may interact with the public on behalf of the organization itself. You also have to make sure that when new employees come into your employment, or new volunteers or whatever it is, that they're also afforded that training, because sometimes that's missed. There's always a gap there. And the other time when there's a gap is if you take that employee from the back room and you move them to the front counter, they're going to have to get the higher level of training. Okay, really important. Okay. Now for training, like I said, you can go to our site, you can go to the government sites, you can get the videos, so there is help out there. For the folks that have 20 or more staff, you actually have to have written policies. Okay, you actually have to have documentation that your staff took the training, and someone may come up to you and say, show me, and if they do, you have to show them your policies, your written policies. Okay, if you're 19 and under, you don't have to codify your policies, but you still have to have the practices, you still have to have conducted the training so that you're providing that good, solid customer services to folks with a disability. Okay, so that's one of the nuanced differences between 19 and 20 in an organization. And the other one is folks with 20 will have to report back. Your report back is due by the end of December of this year. So by December 31st of this year, the businesses with 20 or more will have to do the report back. There is, if you go to the website, the government website, you can actually access the questions. The questions are now out. Okay, I've taken a look at them. They're not that onerous. Okay, it's just a matter of looking at the questions. The questions can also be a very good guide for you to know if you're in compliance or not.